When people think about Kanan and Stark in the original Power, they usually remember one thing: a ruthless man who always seemed 10 steps ahead. Someone who could manipulate almost anyone, hide his emotions when it mattered, and make decisions that left even his closest allies questioning where they stood. But here's the interesting part. The Kanan we're watching and raising Kanan isn't that man, at least not yet. He's still learning. He's still making mistakes. He still has moments where emotion gets the better of him. However, Season 5 feels different from every season that came before it. Instead of showing us a teenager trying to survive the streets, it's beginning to show us someone who is learning how to survive without depending on anyone else. And that may be the biggest step toward becoming the Kanan we eventually meet in Power. So let's break down why Episode 6 suggests Kanan's transformation is accelerating. One of the biggest themes this season is independence. Earlier in the series, Kanan relied heavily on Rak. Even when he challenged her decisions, he still looked to her for answers. That dynamic has changed. Now, Kanan is making decisions based on what he believes is right, not simply following instructions. That doesn't mean every decision is perfect. In fact, some of them could create even bigger problems. But the important point is that Kanan is beginning to trust his own judgment. For someone trying to build a name in this world, that's a major turning point. Earlier in the series, Kanan often viewed situations in black and white. Someone was either loyal or disloyal. Someone was either a friend or an enemy. Season 5 shows a more complicated way of thinking. He's beginning to understand that people have different motivations. Allies can disagree. Enemies can sometimes be useful. Trust has to be earned and sometimes questioned. That's a much more mature way of looking at the world. It's also much closer to the mindset he displays years later in Power. One thing that stands out in Season 5 is how different Kanan's relationship with Rak has become. The issue isn't that they don't care about each other. They clearly do. The problem is that trust has become much harder to rebuild. Years of secrets and manipulation have changed the way Kanan answers his mother. Now, instead of automatically believing her, he evaluates everything she says. That emotional distance is significant because once Kanan stops relying on Rak's guidance, he becomes much more open to learning from other people. Without giving up his independence, Kanan seems increasingly willing to listen to Breeze. What's interesting is that Breeze doesn't try to control every move Kanan makes. Instead, he treats him like someone capable of making his own decisions. That's something Kanan has been searching for. Respect, not protection. Not constant supervision, just respect. Whether Breeze has good intentions or not isn't really the point. What matters is that Kanan feels heard, and that kind of mentorship could shape the man he eventually becomes. If you've noticed one subtle change this season, it's Kanan's patience. Earlier versions of Kanan often reacted immediately. Season 5 shows someone who's beginning to observe before acting. He listens more carefully. He watches how other people behave. He seems more interested in understanding the situation before making his move. That's an important skill in the world he's entering. The most dangerous people aren't always the loudest. They're often the ones paying attention while everyone else is talking. Kanan hasn't become emotionless. He's still deeply affected by the people around him. The difference is that he's getting better at hiding those emotions. Instead of reacting immediately, he's learning when to stay quiet, when to wait, when to gather information. That emotional control is something we've seen from the older Kanan in Power. Season 5 feels like the beginning of that evolution. For a long time, people saw Kanan as Rak's son. That identity came with advantages, but it also came with limitations. Now, Kanan seems determined to create his own reputation. He wants people to respect him because of his own decisions, not because of his family name. That's another reason he's becoming more independent. Every move he makes is helping establish who he wants to be. Whether those choices lead him toward success or tragedy remains to be seen. Another sign of Kanan's growth is how he approaches relationships. He's beginning to realize that loyalty isn't automatic. People have their own goals, their own fears, their own ambitions. That understanding changes how he interacts with everyone around him. Instead of expecting loyalty, he begins evaluating whether it truly exists. That's a much more cautious way of thinking. And caution often becomes one of the defining characteristics of experienced players in this world. When people talk about Kanan becoming the man from power, they often focus on violence. But I don't think that's the most important transformation. The real change is psychological. He's becoming more confident in making difficult decisions. He's becoming less dependent on emotional reassurance. He's accepting that leadership sometimes requires choices that other people won't understand. Those lessons shape a person long before any confrontation does. Season 5 repeatedly reminds Kanan that every decision affects someone else. Every alliance changes another relationship. Every opportunity creates another risk. That's forcing him to think more carefully about the future. The impulsive teenager from earlier seasons is slowly becoming someone who considers the bigger picture. That doesn't mean he'll always make the right choice, but it does mean he'll make more calculated ones. One question keeps coming back after episode 6. Has Kanan already crossed a line? Not into becoming a villain overnight, but into becoming someone who will never see the world the same way again. Sometimes there isn't one defining moment. Sometimes change happens gradually. One lesson, one disappointment, one betrayal at a time. Season 5 feels like it's collecting all those moments. Eventually, they begin shaping a completely different person. Perhaps the saddest part of Kanan's journey is that he isn't trying to become dangerous. He's trying to survive. He's trying to prove himself. He's trying to build a future where nobody controls him. From his perspective, those goals make perfect sense. The tragedy is that the skills required to survive this world often come at a personal cost. The more independent he becomes, the harder it becomes to trust others. The more experienced he becomes, the more emotionally guarded he grows. Those changes don't happen because he wants them to. They happen because of the environment around him. So here's my theory. Season 5 isn't trying to shock us by suddenly turning Kanan into the ruthless figure we remember from Power. Instead, it's doing something much more believable. It's showing the slow, steady transformation of a young man who's learning that survival often demands painful choices. Every conversation with Breeze teaches him something new about leadership. Every disagreement with Rack pushes him toward greater independence. Every difficult decision strengthens his confidence in his own judgment. None of these moments seem huge by themselves, but together, they're quietly building the foundation of the man we'll eventually meet years later. Not because Kanan suddenly becomes evil, not because he wakes up one day as a completely different person, but because every season strips away another piece of a young man he used to be. If Season 5 continues on this path, Kanan won't become the Power version of himself through one shocking event. He'll become that man through experience, disappointment, hard-earned lessons, and a gradual realization that in his world, trusting the wrong person can cost everything. That's what makes his journey so compelling. We're not watching someone transform overnight. We're watching someone slowly become the person history has already told us he will be. And somehow, knowing where he ends up doesn't make the journey any less heartbreaking.